Hello, Daz Studio patrons. My name is Not From This World, and I want to welcome you to my tutorial series. Now, today I promised that I would talk a little bit about Scene Optimizer, which is a set of scripts that will reduce the texture maps of your scene, and it's supposed to help with several things. The first thing is it should help you with render times. The second thing is it helps keep your GPU running so that your computer doesn't get overloaded and knocked down to CPU. We know how challenging that can be because that extends your render times by quite a bit. And if you have your CPU disabled, then you just get a blank screen when you render. So Scene Optimizer should help with that. It also will help with navigating through Daz Studio as you set up your scene. So you can reduce different textures that you may not need immediately and then move your scene around before rendering. So what I'd like to do for this video is just talk about how you can set up Scene Optimizer and kind of how it works. We're going to go through the basics here, and I hope you learn a few extra things with my tutorial. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, to begin with, you're going to find Scene Optimizer in your Daz Studio shop. I just typed in Scene Optimizer and it came up right here. Currently it's at about $26. I know it does go on sale from time to time, so if you want to wait, you can probably pick it up a little bit cheaper if you're just patient. But we're going to purchase this and then we're going to download Internet Manager to get it installed into Daz Studio, and then we can kind of play around with it. So as you can see, I've got Milica, cute as ever, set up in a scene, and I added a background. The background is called the Pool Villa, and so she's kind of hanging out with a simple dress in this pool villa, and we're going to reduce some things around her to show you how this works. Now I'm going to find Scene Optimizer in my products under the content library in the S under Scene Optimizer. So you can see it's right here. If I click on it, you're going to see that there are 4 icons that we can click on, and we're going to be using all of them depending on what we're doing. So the first one is important. We have to do this blue tab first. So when we click on it, we're going to see that it's going to take us into our computer where it wants us to save a file. Now this is a text file that contains all of your original texture maps. So it's really important to save this because Daz Studio is going to need this if you ever want to restore any of the original texture maps. So what I've done is I've just created a folder in my tutorials on my hard drive that just says Scene Optimizer. And I'm just going to save it in this Scene Optimizer folder. And we're just going to name this Milica Test. Okay, so now that is saved, we're going to get this tab that just tells us that the current map configuration was saved. So we'll hit OK. Now we're going to go into the actual script, which is this green icon. So I'm going to click on it. It's going to take a couple moments to figure out all of the different texture files, and then it's going to open up our Scene Optimizer script. All right, and here it is. So you can see there's a lot to it. There's a lot of stuff. We're going to keep this simple. I just want to kind of go over the parts and pieces of the basic use of this script. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at the reduction rate. So we can reduce our texture files by a factor of 2, 4, 8, or 16. Now what I've been told is that if we reduce it by a factor of 2, this is going to be really good for render time, but it's not going to really reduce the quality. So you would think that that would work pretty well. And then if we go into a factor of 4, 8, or 16, we're going to be speeding up render times, but we're going to be reducing that texture map with whatever we have selected to a larger and larger extent. Now, it's also important to understand that if we divide by, let's say, a factor of 4, we're actually reducing the texture maps by 4. So we're going to be reducing it by 4 times. And so if you look at this screen down here, this is a list of everything in the scene, and we can look at a couple of things with this. So first of all, the very top is Milika's hair, and it says that Milika's hair has a texture map with a height of 8,000 and a width of 8,000. So if we decrease this by a factor of 2, we're going to knock it down to 4,000, but that's actually knocking it down 4 times. So there's just some crazy math there that you might be interested in, but I just thought I'd mention that. Now, before we do anything on this screen, we're going to want to make sure that we save these reduced texture files to our hard drive. And that's what this button is for. So it's going to show us where our reduced texture files will be kept. So if I click on this, I have just created a folder within my Scene Optimizer called Maps. And our texture maps are going to be just saved in this folder. Our text map that we just saved under the other tab is right here in Scene Optimizer. So I'm just going to make sure that the map folder is selected, and that's where we're going to be keeping those reduced maps. Now, the list here, we can keep selected what we want to reduce, or we can uncheck it so that it won't be reduced at all. So for this example, I'm just going to unclick Milika because we don't want to reduce our character, and perhaps her clothes. We want to keep those high, so her heels. And then ironically, as we scroll down the list here, it reduces our texture map quality. So the lower we go, the less quality we have with each item. So her dress is actually at a texture map file of 0. So we won't even have to deselect that. Now, another thing to notice is if we go all the way back up to the top, the highest quality texture map is Milika's hair. So it is at a factor of 8,000 by 8,000. So I'm going to keep that checked because I've noticed that, at least with distances, getting rid of the texture files with the hair doesn't seem to have a huge effect. Perhaps if we were zooming in or doing a profile picture where we're looking close at her hair, it may have a factor, but I've noticed that it doesn't really matter with distances. So I'm just going to keep that checked. And then we're ready to reduce all of these texture files. So what we do is we just simply go to this first tab here where it says set lower resolution maps for elements selected in the list. We're just going to hit this and it's going to start reducing everything we have checked. One of the things I want to show you is if I move this over, as it's running, as the script is running, you should see little flashes with the background images, and that means that they are being reduced. So let's see if we can see that as we go. So I'm just going to hit set lower resolution maps, and you can see over here to the left, it's going to start compiling everything. Now, our hair is the highest quality, so it's got to process it first, and it's going to take a few minutes. The top bar, our overall progress. The middle bar is going to tell us how much the current item is being reduced. So right now the hair is at 40%. And then it's going to give us a list of what it is processing. So we're going to let this run for a few minutes, let it finish, and then we'll move on to the next step. It's also worthy to note here that if I cancel this, it's going to keep whatever it has already processed, but then whatever it didn't reduce, it will just stay normal. So you can cancel this partway through, but just realize that it's going to keep whatever it's processed already reduced. All right, it's finally done with the hair, and you can see it's now starting to reduce the texture maps of other items that are in the scene. So our overall progress is moving up a little faster now. It's at 15 and moving up. So this always takes a few minutes to do. Okay, so we are finished, and as you can see here, it just says that the image size reduction is finished or done, so I'm just going to hit OK. Now, if I X out of Scene Optimizer, I can go back in and I can see the reduction. Before I do anything else, though, I'm going to save my scene because I want to keep my original scene available in case I ever need to go back to the original. So I'm just going to type in Milica Scene Optimizer Reduction. And I think I'll just name it 2 so I know that it was reduced by a factor of 2. Okay, now that we have it saved, if I go back to Scene Optimizer, I'm just going to click on this really quick. And I'm going to show you that all of the texture maps that we had checkmarked are now reduced. So for example, her hair was at 8,000. Now it's at 4096. Everything else has been dropped in half. So it's been reduced by 4. So if I run a render, we're going to have reduction. Now, the next thing I want to show you is what to do if we want to restore items. Now, that is why we ran this blue script here and made that texture map. So if I want to, let's say, restore her hair back to where it was, but keep everything else the same, I'm going to use these purple and pink buttons. Now, the purple button is going to restore the scene texture map and so of an item. So this purple tab is going to restore the scene texture map for an object. So what I need to do in order to restore something is I have to select it in the scene. So let's say I don't like the fact that I reduced her hair. I'm going to select her hair. So it's just this loose pigtail hair. And I'm going to select our restore scene, the purple tab. And I just need to select that original text file. Just select it and hit open. And then it's going to say that the current configuration for the maps of all selected items have been restored. So now I've restored her hair. So if I go back into this green tab, the actual script tab, we will see that her loose pigtail hair is now restored back to 8,000. The pink tab is going to restore a scene texture map on a surface. Now it turns out that everything I have in my scene, perhaps except for Milica, doesn't have multiple surfaces. So I can't really show you this on this scene, but if we did have a surface, like let's say this table had multiple texture maps, and I wanted to restore the surface of this table, I would just select the table and then run this script, and it would restore whatever surface I had selected. So that's kind of cool too. You can restore parts of a larger texture map if it's split up into different surfaces. Now back in the actual script itself, I just clicked on the green tab. We have some other options. So we've been selecting the set lower resolution maps for elements selected in the list, but we can also remove existing normal maps or remove existing bump maps from anything selected. We can remove existing displacement maps. We can remove all maps. We can remove the translucency or hide all selected elements or show all selected elements. So we can run the script to reduce or eliminate different texture maps. All right, so that's about going to do it for this tutorial. I wanted to keep it kind of simple. For a future tutorial, though, I am going to run some tests because I have had limited success, I have to admit, with Scene Optimizer. So I want to run some tests. This is a pretty basic scene, and I was running some practice tests with it using our factor of 2, 4, 8, and 16, and I wasn't getting the desired results. So I think I'm going to bump it up and choose a scene that has a lot of texture and try and reduce some backgrounds to see if I can get at least a decrease in our render times and compare that with the quality. So that's going to be coming next. I didn't want to make this video too long, so I'll put those tests in a different video, but I hope this helped you. And if it did, let me know by hitting that subscribe button. Don't forget to like and give me some comments. All right, until next time, happy rendering.